welcome back to Timeless Topics. In this episode, we discuss everything from trauma-informed family-centered care to the work that is needed by clinicians to develop and support relationships in the face of trauma. We are joined by Morgan Kowalski, BA, from the Family-Centered Care Taskforce. Morgan is the NICU parent of Thomas, who was born at 25 weeks gestation, and Director of Operations for the Family-Centered Care Taskforce. She is the Family Liaison for the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Hospital Care and a parent-family partner for the New York State Perinatal Quality Collaborative. We touch a little bit on a potential subject for a future episode towards the end of our discussion. Let us know your thoughts. We're grateful you're here with us, and let's jump into the conversation.
I think one of the things that I hopefully pride myself properly on is my interactions with families. And I like to hear their thoughts, right? I like for them to tell me what we did well, what we could do better, essentially a debrief. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, right? I hope that I'm not adding any extra stress to them, but I really, with certain families, you build this connection and you're like, please tell me how we can be better because ultimately I just want to be better. So, with your history, if this is okay, Morgan, I would say if you could think of anything that you would like to share, especially with me in this academic role as I am teaching baby NNPs, what would you like for them to know about their interactions with families?
I think that's a great question. And I think that, and I think I speak for a lot of parents when I say this, is I just want to be seen as an individual. I don't want to be seen as mom. I don't want to be seen as mom of the sickest baby on the unit. I don't want to be seen as the difficult parent or the one who is, struggling. I I guess I feel like a lot of the interactions I had on the unit, my baby was super critical. We were at a level 4 academic teaching hospital, and he was one of the sickest kids in our, 84 plus bed unit for a long time, for a couple months at least. And I feel like a lot of the interactions I had were, hey, we want to look at your baby. We've got students here. They are learning about this, that, and the other thing. I just kind of felt like he was a specimen a lot of the time, which I can totally appreciate. They're needing to be learning, and I'm all about like non-invasive, research participation for him, anything that will benefit the clinical landscape and other families, right? And that being said, I wish that folks, in those situations would have come in and been like, hey, how are you today?
Yeah.
Students, this is Morgan. Morgan is, and that was done well by, one or two clinicians. But I think by and large, it was, hey, this is, baby Kowalski. And do you mind if we take a look, mom? Do you mind if we take a look at his jet ventilator? And, it just kind of felt like, ugh, kind of yucky.
Yeah.
And like, my only role, like our only role was to, I mean, maybe experiment is a really strong word, but like just be a teaching post for folks. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a way you can do it that's like really trauma informed, introducing, what would you like to share with these students about your baby? That would have been a great, oh my gosh, if they had said that to me at the outset of their introductions with me. And of course it's them telling me their names, right? They're not asking me mine. Um, and hey, tell us about Thomas. How's his day going? Is it, tell us what you understand about the jet ventilator. We're really interested in showing, our medical students the jet vent. And, what do you think it's doing to help Thomas? Or maybe you don't think it's helping Thomas. We'd love to hear. I think that that's a really important part of some of that work.
Yeah. You're calling out the principle of healthy relationships and interactions, um, and that's just such an awesome medium to begin to sow the seeds of safety, trustworthiness, all of those normal human, like, forget about the hospital, forget about, the context, just like regular, normal human stuff. But we,
Mhm.
we get into these spaces and places And we think that we're now, I don't know, in a different zone or world or something where,
There's different social rules, right? Like
yeah,
it's some of the like nuances and niceties, so to speak, are kind of like just out the window, you
yeah,
know?
Right.
Fortunate because we need them most
yeah,
in the NICU setting as families.
so true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clinicians are trained on paper to ask open-ended questions, but we actually kind of hate them, right?
Mhm.
Because we like open-ended questions with like a word count, right? Because it's afraid to say, well, how are things going? Well, then you're going to start telling me a whole bunch of stuff I can't fix, and I'm here to fix things. And
Mm-hmm.
really and truly, I'm actually in, the examples you gave, I'm here to show somebody else about something that might fix something. I'm not actually here to talk about, well, I'm also worried about his pain management, or I noticed he had a rash here, or I noticed he's
Mm-hmm.
not being able to sleep much. Like those are all genuine concerns that a parent should be able to, raise about their child's hospitalization. But I ain't here to hear that right now. I
Yeah,
want to hear, yeah, of course, you can see him. That sounds great. I love that. I want everybody to learn. And even though that might
Yes.
actually be factually true, you do want people to learn. Like you said, you want to contribute
Yeah.
to the greater body. It's still this expectation that to only show up in that fawn response, right? Trauma response of, well, of
Yes.
course you can. This is the worst absolute, few months of my life, but yeah, you can learn from it. You can
Yeah.
extract from my trauma, right?
Yes.
And
And I kind of feel like, not to cut you off right in the middle
no,
of
go
that,
ahead.
Jesse, but I feel like if you want to come and take advantage, so to speak, of my family's pain and my child's, pain, part of me feels like you should have to put in a little bit of effort and work for
Yeah.
it, like maybe you do have to sit and listen to me spin a yarn about the traffic on the way into the unit and how hard it is to find a parking spot, and you know I don't know,
yeah,
Yeah.
you say what you were going to say.
No, but that's you asking us to show up as humans for a human in a human-based interaction, right? Because
Yeah.
your human factors of you want me here, you expect me here, you expect me to bring breast milk, you expect me to do
Mhm.
skin to skin, but it takes me an hour and a half to get here and I have to circle the parking garage 15 times and then pay $20 a day to park. Like
Yeah.
those are all factors that go into the human experience as a NICU parent or any parent of hospitalized children,
Sure.
right? And so you sit there and you're like, oh, look, I'm willing to do the things that y'all want for me, but what do I get out of this other than a baby, right? Because that's the minimum. Again, it's the thing I say all the time. Like, if death is the only metric you're counting, then you're doing this all wrong, right?
Hmm.
Like, my expectation is to leave with a baby, which I feel like is reasonable, right? In most
Yes.
cases, or at least to know that we tried hard for that to happen. But I do think there are other things we could work on along the way. We don't have to
Yeah.
just focus on, well, her baby's going home, so we did the job. Well, we could
Mhm.
maybe grow a little bit. We could do a better job, right? And hold
Right.
ourselves and our peers accountable for that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But how do we, because I'm always going to go back to this, right? How do we teach all of this, right?
Mm.
Other than to say, hey, Morgan, I know that you talk about this every single day. Would you come talk to my students? Because it feels sometimes fake for me if I am saying, this is what our parents are feeling. This is what they're, right? Like I can teach you from the
Mhm.
textbook, but those lived experiences speak volumes. But then I want to be respectful, as I said when I first asked the question, like I want to be respectful of the fact that I am not contributing, exacerbating, adding to. But again, I want to do the right thing. And so I always feel a little bit torn of how much is too much for me to ask, but I also don't want to speak for you for a situation that I've only seen from the periphery and have not had to walk.
I think that's so complex. And I think that, Tracy, you seem so authentic. And I think authenticity is a big part of it. Like, hey, my team would really benefit from hearing about your experience. And some families don't like to do that, and some families are comfortable with that. And I want to know how you would feel about it, right? And I think giving folks like a solid out, or saying like, think about it and let me know, or, not putting people on the spot. Some of those like, you know, genuine kind of things that we would do for somebody outside of the NICU. More often than not, people want to help, right? Even if they don't have the capacity to. And I think that it's, more about just fostering like the safe space. I think that for me, when I've been asked to speak to AAP fellows, and I've been asked to like help onboard AAP fellows. And I think what really helped me was knowing that the person who was kind of managing, this kind of orientation was super genuine, like genuinely cared about family-centered care, wanted to improve the experience for families. It didn't feel like, hey, Morgan, I have to check this box and you're the only parent I know. And so can you come talk to and she prepped 5 questions for me. It was, what did we do well? What could we do better? What's one thing you'd want, folks to know? And just kind of like high level, and then you can drill down as needed, but she prepped me like this is what to expect. And then after the conversation, hey, how did that go for you? I'm sure stirred up some feelings. How are you doing? I can already tell they found, the students found that really helpful. This is going to really benefit them. Thank you again for your time. And I didn't get the meal or the parking stipend or the gift card, but that in and of itself was like enough.
You know what makes you, when you were speaking about, the presenting and sharing your lived experience, and I've seen, these panels and stuff like that, at a variety of different conferences, and I know that they are so super powerful. But it also feels like that's the end of it. Like we hear these incredibly poignant, heart stopping sometimes stories, and that move folks to just to that, that edge of all of their emotions and holding it all together. And it's such a powerful space. But then it's like, okay, remember that, remember how you felt, and hopefully you'll change. And I'm not an educator in a hospital setting or anything like that. So maybe folks do pick up, where that story left off, and begin to identify then what are those competencies then that reflect the internalization of this person's, story in
Mhm.
ways that compel you to then take action, do things differently in a sustainable way that can be measured and evaluated to show not only yourself, but every other Tom, Dick, and Harry in the space, and the bean counters and all the, you know what I mean? Like that this
Yeah.
is really profound. It feels like we we curate these, profound moments, but then nothing follows through. And I would defer to Tracy and Jesse to comment on, do they see that follow through in their experiences? But I haven't really.
I think it depends on the person on both sides. The thing that kept bubbling up to me when Morgan was talking is that we have an accountability when we ask parents to come share their story. Like we have an accountability to be a good steward of that relationship. I know I sound like Mary, but like we just rubbed off. But
I
like we
love
have an
it.
accountability to be a good steward or shepherd through this process, and
Yeah.
saying like, I'm so grateful that you're willing to be vulnerable and brave and share your story, but I'm also going to protect you, hopefully, from further harm, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
recognize that this might bubble up for you, but I'm going to check in with you afterwards. I'm going to make sure that the gratitude is felt, whether it's monetary or, person to person, some mix of both, right? I think this is something that FCC Task Force does well, right? It's like, I want to hear your story, but I also want to value you as an individual, having the equal partnership model where the committees are led by equal partners. So it's not just a bunch of professionals telling everybody what to do,
Mhm.
trying to compensate and promote compensation for peer support in NICUs and things like that. It
Mhm.
makes it feel less transactional because you are actually saying like, but I also recognize you're more than just a NICU parent. Like, yes, you're here to share that intersection of your life with me, but you also have all these other versions of you that are showing up now and in other places. And I want to value the full thing. As somebody who pleads with learners of all kinds to hear that story and to listen to it sometimes translates immediately because sometimes I'll get stopped and I'll hear, I remembered your story about the bath, and that made me make a different choice with my family.
Oh,
And you're like, okay, good, because I don't want anybody to feel what I felt like when I was told that the bath was done. Like, I don't want that,
yeah.
But then there are other times where it's like, how many times am I going to tell your face this story? Like, I need you to hear me, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and depending on the relationship, you can have that frank conversation, or you just have to go, maybe I just got to wait you out. You're going to retire or move sometime, which is not a good place to feel. It doesn't feel good to be there, but you're like, but also I can't fire you or hold you accountable, but in a peer-to-peer way. So all I can do is keep hoping that you'll either grow up or out kind of mentality.
Mhm. And I also worry, like, Mary and Jesse, you've both heard me share my story, and I kind of go to like the darkest day that, I preface it by saying it was the worst day of my life. And I think I share a lot about how I felt, and my unit didn't have a big fancy FCC program. It was just kind of a handful of, passionate neos and nurses who kind of just were like, hey, keep doing this, keep doing what you're doing. And I worry, like, I look like the people who are listening to me. I
Mhm.
speak like the people who are listening to me. I dress like the people who are listening to me. I, probably believe a lot of the same things the people who are listening to me believe. And I worry, like, how does that translate into, I guess what I'm trying to say is it frustrates me that people give more value to stories that come from people who they can see themselves in, right? And how do we get to a place where people are able to honor the feelings of all people, regardless of how they look, think, act, speak, what they believe, etc. Their financial situation? I feel like we inherently in our society, have more respect for people who are white and wealthy and educated and speak well and, show up every day freshly showered, or, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
And, I want the compassion to extend beyond that,
Yeah.
because that's just not, I mean, the norm.
Yeah, I mean, we have to keep talking about equity, right?
Yeah.
We have to keep talking about equity and
Mhm.
bias and talking about that every human that is in the NICU of all roles and types
Mhm.
is entitled for their humanity to be respected and acknowledged and seen and supported, right? And that's really hard when they don't look like me, when I can't see me in them, but they are still somebody. They are still a person who is inherently worth dignity, right? And
Mhm.
that's an active mindset that you have to make as a clinician, as a parent, as everybody. Because we honestly, a lot of clinicians don't even think that way about the baby, right? Let alone the family. And so
Right.
having to constantly call out that, like, this is a person who is deserving of
Mhm.
support for their body and their capabilities and their emotional needs, right? Whether we're talking about a 24-week person who's 2 days old, or we're talking about
Yeah.
the parent of that 24-week person, you know.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable for us because it's
Mhm.
easiest for us to just put you in a box and be like, oh, you're the 24-weeker who blah, 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 right? And I'm going to adjust the
Yeah.
vents and do this. And you're going to have hyperglycemia because you're stressed out. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to adjust your D10 and,
Mhm.
all these other things, rather than realizing that, okay, but there are so many other ways we can support this baby's stress response and his transition to the world that we are just,
Yeah.
But the sad
Yes.
thing is that if you said that to people, because we have, right? And they will tell you, I treat everybody the same.
Mm.
So the first step is that we have to realize that we don't, right? We don't. And it's human nature, right? I had a situation just a few days ago where I had to tell someone, no, 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 no. You are not going to say the methadone baby. Like, I am offended for that child. And they were like, but the baby is. I was like, no, the baby is, again, random name, Sue, right? Like, it is not like I was ready to go to blows. If I didn't have to pay my mortgage and my car note, I probably would have, right? But I did stop
Mhm.
and caught myself because there are bills that have to be paid. But it's like you have to teach people have to be human before they can be
Mhm.
anything else. And that is my biggest frustration. Hearing you speak, Morgan, it's just like, yes, 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 and yes. But
Mhm.
also my pessimistic side is like, there's so many people who just aren't good humans. So how can I
Yes.
expect them to see beyond that?
Mhm.
I think
Yes.
because we've focused though on this this challenge as an individual phenomenon. This is an individual failure instead of really like widening the lens and realizing,
Mhm.
you know what, this is actually a system problem with a whole bunch of individuals in the mix. And if the system isn't going to take responsibility or accountability for creating and establishing a culture that is equitable, respectful, compassionate, and all of those things, then, you know, leaving it up to Tom, Dick, and Harry, it's a crapshoot of what's going to happen. And, you know, I think instead of us keep, finger wagging to, different individuals about you need to be better, you need to be better, you need to be better. It's really about we need to be better. We need to work on the relationships with each other. And I know
Mhm.
that that can be a challenge because oftentimes, and Trace, you've spoken about this too, about the lack of diversity in the healthcare team itself, that most healthcare teams don't reflect the communities that they serve. So that is in and of itself a challenge, but it is a starting point, right? I mean, and so beginning to establish core foundational values and expectations for performance, not just in the doings, but in how you show up in the language. And, we talk a lot about language, and I know FCC has that really cool language statement as well. So, really kind of taking all of these expectations of the individual and expanding the scope and say, how about we start working on how we're going to interact with each other? What is the core, what is the floor of what is acceptable language, behavior, attitude,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. Set those clearly out there. Everyone signs on board. These are the values of how, when we cross that threshold, we act with each other first. I mean, I mean, you don't have to do it linear, but like, if you start with the team and that becomes the practice ground, then it gets embedded, right? I mean, neuroplasticity, all the cool biological things that we just friggin' go nuts about, come into play. And then it becomes our default attitude, language, behavior, expectations when we then welcome folks,
Mm.
into the space. It's not, perfect, but it just at least feels like a starting point because wagging your tail at, your finger at folks to get better is just whistling in the wind, I mean, it just, nothing's going to change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not that it's an individual problem, but systems are made of individuals. So like you've
Yeah,
got to start
yeah,
somewhere,
yeah.
right? It's like
Mhm.
embracing the complexity of that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
to your point, it's not like shaking fingers and like, Tracy, you're so terrible, but it's like, hey, let's start with an opportunity here that then we could, ripple and expand, right? And
Mhm.
then build on that, web or weave or whatever it is, metaphor we want to use that could get us closer to a safe place for all parties,
Yeah.
right?
A culture of accountability or a culture of, respect and dignity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of
And
like
it's
you do on the calls, I mean, when we have our
Mhm.
FCC task force calls, the coming right out of the gate, there's this, we state what the expectations are and how this experience will run. Similarly, in your unit, onboarding and every shift, maybe every
Yeah.
huddle. This is how the expectation, because people need reminders and redundancies if you're trying to shift habits and biases and all of these other kinds of things. You need to remind me, or I'm going to go back to my default setting because I got lots of things spinning around in here. And until that
Yeah.
gets stuck, I need your help.
I was running a simulation in a unit like last week, and I was going through my normal thing, and I put a little trauma informed, equity, family centered, and everything, right? And so I was adding that kind of component in it. And this respiratory therapist stopped me and he goes, "Oh, so you just like we should put our egos down and look at these people as people?" And I was like, "Yes, sir. Would you like to come teach with me?" Like, like yes, in one sentence, yes. I'm a much more wordy woman than one sentence, but yes, that's my exact point. And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "I think we forget that this is somebody's baby." I was like, "Yeah, we do." Because to us, they're the 8 o'clock touch time who needs a nebulizer and a diaper change, right?
Yep.
But we have to remember that we're doing all of those things to a person
Mhm.
who is then connected to a community of other people that they're like invaluable to, right? And if we
Yes.
can connect with that, even in a tiny way, it helps make it easier to see that person and then see the humanity in each other as well. So that we're
Yeah.
not just the nurse or the RT. We are Jesse, and coming in and has a story that maybe I'm not getting into the weeds of right now, but you at least know my name and who I am and
Mhm.
what I'm here to do.
Well, and remembering that everybody that you encounter is somebody's baby. right? Like we talk about these babies, and yes, they are so precious and they are so wonderful, but that mother is somebody's baby. And it doesn't matter how old you are still somebody's baby. That woman who came in addicted to whatever, that is somebody's baby, right? That man who, yes, right now maybe seem abusive and may have his own demons that he's fighting, he is somebody's baby. And if we would remember that about every single person that we encounter, that coworker that I don't like right now, that is somebody's baby, right?
Mhm.
And if we could just take it back to that level and realize that no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in this world, you're somebody's child.
Yeah, I love that. Not to make this about this, but I, am a woman of faith. And I've heard like you'll never look into the eyes of somebody who isn't a child of God, right? Like everybody who, is a child of God and do unto me as you would the least, of them. And I think that, there's certainly a parallel there, right? The golden rule. And, regardless of what you believe, I think that we all need to treat each other with kindness and respects.
Yeah. I think remembering the baby thing, Tracy, really, you know, because we see babies in such a special glowy light, right? To remind ourselves that we all started out life as a baby. And
Hmm.
I mean, hopefully can help people reroot in our shared humanity. I mean, sometimes it can feel like a big stretch, but I think, reminding ourselves of that is a touchstone for how you then navigate. But it needs to be repeated, right? I need to be supported as I find my way back to the we that this me is a part of. I love what you said, Morgan.
But, I don't subscribe to a faith. I'm vocal about that. I don't fault
Yeah,
people for having it, just like I would hope they don't fault me for not having it,
sure.
right? Because I come at this from a language of everyone is owed their own lens to their
Mhm.
experience, and anything that helps somebody connect with their own humanity, I'm never going to shade as long as it doesn't encroach on someone else's humanity and their
Yes.
rights to a body and a person,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And as someone who grew up in a religious environment, like aggressively religious environment, like I do see the value in some of the lessons. There really are those parables of just humanity, right? Of like
Hmm.
care for everybody, the golden rule, like treat everybody like you would want to be treated. Everybody is owed, things like somewhere safe to sleep, somewhere safe to eat, like all of those things. Like those are
Hmm.
just foundational principles of how to be a good human. I think over time, systems have creeped in and made them toxic,
Yeah.
in certain lenses, right? And they've taken over and kind of commodified the humanity, if you will, and trying to put everything in a hierarchy of like, no, but we're like special humans and they are not special humans because
Yeah.
they don't tie their shoes this way on Tuesdays, right? Like all these arbitrary rules that some religious systems build. And
Hmm.
that's where I think it gets lost, like the message gets lost.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
Yeah.
people who find value in human to human work, I think that's what we need more of. No matter
Hmm.
what lens you run it through, it's being able to see a human for a human and how to support them, regardless of
Yes.
all the other arbitrary things.
Your religiosity is really just one other facet that you can either use to connect us to each other, celebrate our differences and our diversity, or
Hmm.
promote disconnection, which we see a lot, right? I mean, particularly, Islamophobia and even rejection of Catholicism and Judaism and I mean that we use these. I love the word arbitrary that you use, Jesse, because it is. They're very arbitrary criteria that just promote this disconnection and further invade, or not invade, maybe disrupt the reality of our shared humanity, that lends itself to all of these other crazy things and hurtful things and hateful things,
Hmm.
So
And
yeah.
I think, yeah, that's where humans have kind of maybe ruined spirituality because it's not meant to be divisive. It's meant to be, something that brings us together.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, just unfortunately been tainted.
Yes.
So then it's figuring out, okay, how can we detaint it? I don't know, that's not a word, but like how can we reverse it?
Because
You
Yes.
know?
I think
I
we
can
can
appreciate
Um,
that.
the goodness of it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Disinfect.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, because it's got its purpose. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you've got a community. You can, teach people how to have like be that village that nobody has anymore.
Mhm.
Like, but the reality is a lot of these systems have caused a lot of harm too.
Yes,
So it's that
I agree.
accountability lens of like, okay, how do we hold the systems accountable while,
Hmm.
really saying like, hey, but this part isn't all bad. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to just be completely dismantled. We can find, some good in with it. And I think that's the complexity of humanity anyway, right?
Like the
Like,
healthcare system, right? Like
yeah,
y'all are
right.
there to do like cause no harm.
Yeah,
You're there to help and fix and heal. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of harm that's done.
Mhm.
And, there's always going to be good people in a system, and there's always going to be, I don't want to say bad people because I don't know that people are
that's
inherently
good.
bad, but people who make bad choices maybe, or who don't make the best choices. And I think that we can draw a huge parallel between, some of the rules that are created to keep people kind of in a hierarchy and, power over situations and, what the intent of the system actually is.
That's the infection, though, right? I mean, that's the
Mhm.
infection from the larger society and all of the structural oppression and structural racism and all of these other things. That's the infection that has contaminated the um, the ethical principle of first do no harm, and you can kind of see it, right? Because the more I can disconnect folks from their humanity, from their connectedness, in the wake of so much diversity, the more I can keep folks disempowered. They're more vulnerable to manipulation,
Mhm.
marginalization. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yes.
wicked insidious. It's a cancer. You hear folks use that language because it's slow moving, but it's deadly.
Mhm.
And I think we're reaping, sadly, the results of that contagion in the way we interact with not just the babies and the families, but certainly with each other, with our
Mhm.
communities. When we're not representing, the people that we're serving in meaningful, authentic ways. And so, I think it kind of makes me think of that thing, how about people say things roll downhill. That almost feels again intentional by design too, right? Because if it rolls downhill, all that stuff isn't going to touch me. And I've created this world where I can stay pristine and powerful and, all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I do it because I have to shed these things instead of share these things, with everybody. So I think, broadening the lens is a really helpful way of beginning to gain maybe deeper insight, and with the insight almost, kind of some solutions, I mean, or at
Mhm.
least some tests of change, right? To, try and get folks shifted away from kind of, well, this is just the way it is, to it doesn't have to be that way, but we have to have a sense of agency and autonomy, you know,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if those are the right words, to actually do something about it. Because it ain't
Yeah.
go away just because we're wishing it and hoping it and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff.
It goes back to what Jesse said about like, do you begin with the individual? Do you begin with the system? Like, it's just so complex.
Yeah,
And I do feel like I mean, hospital systems, I think, are becoming so corporate. And I feel like they could totally borrow from corporate America, at least in the US, and um, in the way that they take care of their staff. And I mean that by, I used to work in corporate America before I had my son, before I had to quit my job and be his primary nurse after discharge home. And in that setting, I mean, the company's motto, slogan, whatever was meant to like, really jazz us salespeople up was like everywhere, right? It was on all of our, custom notepads. It was on the wall, on a decal. It was, we were given tags for our car, the little air fresheners that had it. And I wonder, like, how can we do that for hospital systems? Like, could we create like a people are people? Everybody is somebody's baby, and just like put it in a decal.
yeah.
Like, in the staff elevator, or like as you're like preparing for your shift, just a little reminder, like, hey,
Yeah, we love you. Yeah.
yes, we love you, and let's treat
Let's
people with dignity today.
do this thing.
Yeah, I think that coupled with a living wage, that coupled with, a decent, way to take time off, that coupled with an environment that is safe and just culture based. Like, yes, and,
Yeah.
all of these other things, like that's how we turn this around, right? Because I
110%.
think it makes me think of the like pandemic, like healthcare heroes. And you're like, I'm still showing up to work in a trash bag to an ICU though. So how much of a hero am I really, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, coupling those things with action. And I think that's what's missing in even some of the corporate stuff, right? Is like it feels good for a moment, but then you're like, okay, now what? Like, so finding that way to connect that energy and the, probably well-meaning nature of it to some action that makes
Yeah.
you really say that I actually do think that I am a person and somebody's baby and someone else sees me that way, right? I
Mhm.
think a lot of people are so burnt out in healthcare specifically that it's just like, it's the flavor of the month. Okay, cool. We'll wear purple on Wednesdays because that's going to make everybody happy. And you're like, but I still can't take time off, or I'm still getting
Yeah.
emails because I'm not charting within tenths of a second, or, like all the things. So you're like, okay, how can we embrace the complexity of it, like we've talked about, to say that
Mhm.
this is one answer, or one way that we can contribute. How else can we contribute, right?
Yeah.
And listen to the community that's affected by it on both sides. When we're thinking in that sense, it would be, be your employees, right? But then also listen to the community that you care for, because the way your employees feel about where they work and what they're doing is directly impacting the care that they provide. And so when you can connect those two things, then perhaps your HCAP scores and your leapfrog scores and all the other things, the US World News Report, all the things everybody chases, could also maybe benefit when you have a, workforce that's rooted in humanity. Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe we capture metrics that are better indicators of the human experience.
Mhm.
Because right now we're capturing indicators that are measures of the economic experience,
Mhm.
but not the human experience. And so I think that you're right. In all of those elements, and adding,
Mhm.
did you feel like that you belonged? Did you feel like you were respected? Did you feel like people understood you? Um, did you feel, you used this earlier, did you feel seen? Such a
Mhm.
small thing, but did you feel seen? And you know what, Nancy, Nurse, Jesse, Tracy, do you feel seen in your organization? Because if you
Mhm.
guys don't feel seen in your organization, whether you articulate it or not, that disconnection, that alienation, that isolation, it affects you. It affects you physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, even spiritually. And over time, it erodes how you show up to others.
Oh,
And
your family,
yeah,
your
what you don't have. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it bleeds out into everything.
yeah.
One of these days, we're going to have to do an episode on spiritual trauma because your girl loves getting uncomfortable talking about that. But um, I love it so much because I think it's so impactful. Like, I think all trauma has a lens that affects the way that a body connects to a spirit, right? And connects to their individual and who they are. And when we can accept that as an unfortunate fact, then we can work to fix it and understand it and embrace it rather than just keep denying it,
Right.
you know?
Mhm.
One day we'll get into it.
That's a big fear of mine. Like, as I, try to like raise my children with their own faith, like, we found a great church community, but I'm always kind of on guard. Like,
Mm.
is what they're being taught appropriate? And, from my
Yeah.
expectation, I just, can be so easily broken,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's trust, right? Like you want to trust the community, but it's fragile right now. I think especially in US and probably in other parts of the world too. Like everything just feels so fragile.
Yes.
Um, but I think the fact that you're concerned about it means that they're going to be okay, right? Because you're paying attention. You're not just like blindly, well, if that's what your Sunday school teacher said, then that's it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's saying like, because I've had conversations myself, my kids will come home and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Where did we learn
Mhm.
that? And try to help them like deconstruct it, to get to this point that, maybe those words explicitly are right or wrong, but let's talk about the more like the broader picture and
Yeah.
the fact that they can engage in that reflection about their beliefs rather than just hand down beliefs, to
Yes.
me is what's needed. Like that teaches critical thinking and teaches people how
Yes.
to see the individual tree for the forest. So that to me is just good parenting.
Well, thank you for saying that, seeing that in me.
Sure.
Because it's my goal. It's what I'm striving for.
Look, we're all trying to turn out good humans, right? In a system that doesn't seem to want them, but we're going to force it on them anyway.
I mean, I really appreciate the information, Morgan, that you have shared and that you have conveyed. I think, I always come at it from this academic lens of like now, because for me, again, right, I feel like I need to take something out of every conversation that I have to be able to take it back and say, okay, as we are raising these baby NNPs, and I hope no one takes offense to that, but that is kind of how I see it, that we are raising them again to be good humans, right? As we were just talking about with our own children. I kind of feel that way about the NNPs that I am helping mentor, guide, educate. And so I take something from every conversation, especially from someone who has walked the walk and lived the experience, to say, this is how we can be better. And even if it is only one person who hears it and really applies it into practice, then a drop in the bucket and eventually we'll fill the bucket up so that it tips over, right?
I
So
love
we
that.
just keep dropping.
I love that.
We really appreciate you sharing your experiences and your time with us. I hope that our audience learned as much as we did from this moment. And if you haven't already, people who are listening, looked into or joined the Family-Centered Care Taskforce, I encourage you to do so. We will tag them and all the things in the social media post when we post this. It's an organization that you will not regret joining. The information they share and the empowering messages they send really can make a big difference in helping to fill that bucket, like Tracy said.
Thank you all so much. I've long been a fan of this. I've been a fan of this podcast for as long as it's existed, I should say. And it's an honor to join you all. And thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining.
Timeless Topics is Jesse Barnes, Tracy Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jesse Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.